Hi everyone, I'm the Rambling Photon, and today I want to talk about a bit of a case study in applying my logical framework to a topical issue that's in the news. So, in America, Trump has outlined a ban of trans people in the military. So, let's look at the merits of this from a few different perspectives, a few different metrics, if you will. So, from what I can see, there are sort of two camps. There's the social justice camp and the military effectiveness camp. Now, the difference between these two is mainly in what they view as the ultimate goal of the military. So we have our picture, we have our two inputs. There's the empirical facts and there's the values and metrics that we put into our logical machine, and we get our conclusion. Right? So, to me, the primary difference between these two camps is what they view as the metric for evaluating the conclusions. Okay? So, in the social justice camp, the metric is how they would spin equality. Okay? So, transgender people should be allowed in the military because being allowed into the military is some sort of equal right. You know, people should have the equal right to serve in the military or something like that, right? Not allowing them is discriminatory. It's against their concept of equity or whatever, right? And then the other perspective is military effectiveness. The people who are in favor of the ban are usually saying we shouldn't have to worry about trans people because spending resources on them is not an effective use of military resources, and what we want is a military that is good at military things. So fighting wars, killing people, destroying the enemy, that sort of thing, right? Now, I will personally tend to lie on the military effectiveness side, because when you're talking about a military fighting people and doing the things that militaries do, which is fight wars and hopefully win wars, and in the process they might have to kill a lot of people, or they would have to physically defend the American citizens from some outside foe, right? Now, in that case, whether to allow transgender people into the military or not is a purely empirical question. Does allowing transgender people into the military benefit the military more than it costs? Our metric is effectiveness. Do there exist enough transgender people who are good enough at the military side? Do enough of those people exist to justify finding them out of all of the transgender people who want to join the military but are not useful, aren't going to be a burden, going to be a net cost? And I think the jury might still be out on that. I think Justicar, Integral Math on YouTube, check out his video. He has a very nice response to Theryn Meyer on this subject, and he outlines some of the considerations that the military has to go through when talking about excluding or allowing certain groups of people to join or not join, as the case may be. And from the way he presents it, I can certainly buy that transgender people in the military will cost the military more than they will benefit the military. But if somebody can present me a study showing the opposite or showing contrary, I have no problem with including them. So on the other side, on the equality side, there is this idea that the military is a job just like any other, and so any sort of discrimination should not be allowed. And while I can understand why they're saying that and where they're coming from on that front, I personally don't think that the desire for equality trumps the purpose of the military in that sense. It's nice to have those particular ideals, and it to a degree, but it's one of those things. If for example, the military has a policy where they exclude everyone who has a daily medication requirement, okay? So they're not explicitly excluding transgender people, but transgender people who are on daily medications wouldn't be eligible. Okay, are they discriminating against trans people? Well, no. They're discriminating against people who take a daily medication, So there are certain requirements in the military that I don't think equality has anything to do with it. And again, this is sort of my bias in that I don't think that in the military, equality is a useful value. In the military, it strikes me as you need to be much more meritocratic. You need to be good at your job. You need to be competent at your job. And are there going to exist trans people who are competent? Sure. But are there also going to exist trans people who burden the system more than their competence compensates for? What the net balance is, I don't know. But it's something that I think that the equality camp doesn't necessarily understand. And I don't think they quite get the value. They don't understand the weights of the values of the people who are at least willing to accept the ban. Okay, so if you're in the equality camp, this decision to ban doesn't make any sense to you because it goes against human rights or something like that. But really, this is a case where your two values are in contradiction, okay? Because I assume that the people who want equality also want the military to be effective, because if the military is not effective, the military can't protect the equalities that they're claiming to want. Now, if you're completely anti-military, I can understand, but it's also a little too idealistic. Militaries exist. Militaries are a fact of the world, just like nation states are. And even as somebody who, in my ideal, as I talked about in one of my previous videos, ideally I'm an ANCAP, but because in practice I'm not, as far as we can see that there's been no practical implementation of that. In the meantime, I can understand the value and the necessity of having a military to defend the rights and the freedom of different countries that value freedom and equality. And having an ineffective protection arm is not the way that you preserve those things. So this is where you temper your values with the pragmatism, right? So if we accept that we need a protection arm to protect equality, to protect our freedoms, then it makes sense to have that arm be effective at that job. And in that case, your metric for that branch should be the effectiveness of the protection and not whether or not that protection arm is implementing all of your ideals to their fullest. So there are going to be times where equality is not going to win in the military because not everybody's equal. And what we want in the military is an effective protection arm. So if you allow your values to cripple the ability of your protection arm and you get into a conflict where you need the protection arm, then you might lose all of your values. And so that's a risk that you need to decide whether you're willing to take. Justicar goes into much more depth with this, but basically the gist of his point is that even little hits to morale can add up and break the ability of a military to be effective. And enforcing and giving special privilege in the name of equality to transgender individuals in the military can serve as another straw on the camel's back, which might not break it, but also might break it. And that's something to be concerned about. And that's stuff we need to think about. And this conflict between these two values of military effectiveness versus equality and anti-discrimination, we need to be honest about how we're balancing them. And we need to be able to understand both starting points. And if we don't want to be bigoted, those of us who think that the military needs to be effective needs to be open to the idea that maybe equality does line up. But the folks who are on the equality side need to understand that maybe it doesn't. So anyway, that's some of my thoughts on this current topical issue and how to break it down in my logical framework. So if you like my content, like, share, subscribe, all that shit. Comments are always welcome down below. I've been the Rambling Photon. Hope to catch you next time.